Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. First of all, big thank you to all the people who have diligently taken out 90 minutes every second Saturday and been a part of this program. Today is the concluding session of the ENRICH part of the program. The idea of ENRICH is really to get us up to a certain degree of awareness about ourselves and become a bit more nimble, bit more flexible, bit more plastic in the way we think about things. Then the next part is really going to be Excel, where we will talk a bit more about it right at the end. And finally, the Embody, which will be another 6 months and 6 months. And that will conclude the whole program, which is called Teachers as Neurosculptors. Excel won't start right away. We will start Excel in about a month and a quarter, a month and a half. Like I think most of you know that we are launching the math program as well. Therefore, I'll have to correctly schedule it. And, we want to give it the best we can to both the programs. And we have to manage the time effectively so that we are not doing any injustice to any of the programs. All right, so today the didactic will be 40 minutes. Where's my phone? Okay, my phone is lying somewhere else. That's fine. I will try to time myself. So the didactic is going to be for 40 minutes. The first almost 30 minutes will get spent in terms of reviewing all the 11 sessions we have had so far. Actually, we've had 12, including session number 0, which was the pre-launch. Okay, so we really started off by asking this question, saying when it comes to, let us say, we get ourselves a new degree or become a graduate or go up the ladder in terms of getting promoted from that of a teacher to the head of a primary school or head of a secondary school or the school principal, or we get a pay jump or a holiday, shopping, home, car. Do all these things create a higher quality of life? And the answer to that, as much as many people normally, when we ask this question, try to say they don't, they do. They add to the quality of life big time. Money does buy happiness. The only issue with some of these things, it's habituating. And 2, it creates what is called a quality of life external and not necessarily an internal quality of life. When we talk about internal quality of life, what we really refer to is a deep sense of joy, fulfillment, peace, vitality, optimism, and all of that. The general sense of energy and good feeling about ourselves and about the world around us, about our colleagues and everything. There are those days which are very sunny days. If every moment, every day, every month is sunny, that's really somebody having a very high quality of life, internally speaking. What we need is both. We need both the external conditions and the internal conditions for us to be able to function well externally and function well internally as well. A lot of professionals perform very well externally, but they might or might not be very good internally, in the sense, how do they feel about themselves, their life, and the way it is going? That might or might not be in relationship with that. I mean, we have great examples of exceptionally wonderful artists who internally have suffered all kinds of mental issues. Whether it is professional, IPR, all of that is good external functioning. We have seen all this. And the question we come back and ask, or rather asked, about 6 months back when we started the program. It's been 6 months and time has really flown. 6 months back when we launched this program sometime in October, and we asked the question, why is it so difficult to achieve an internal quality of life? The reason for that was, when we look at the journey of life, we learn, we become knowledgeable, we gain experience, we make money, we get married, we produce children, all of that happens. But in the process of making all of that, we get harder with our preset mental processes and patterns. We start imagining that we kind of know how things have to be done or how things have to be dealt and how things have to be managed. And we get into a strong sense of right and wrong, good and bad about things and the right way to do it. So we get hardened with our thought process. Now, this hardening is really what we want to work on and try and see what is that about this process of hardening. There are some learnings which we want to retain, but at the same time, to stay hard with various opinions, thoughts, ideas is not such a good thing because it leads to inflexibility cognitively, emotionally, and dispositionally. So the mind really ends up being a prisoner inside itself, and it's not free. So it's the mind which is not free because it's stuck in certain ideas which can't evolve, and it can only think of it repetitively in the same way. And that is what we call as survive. So we just survive. Even if you're thriving professionally, it is still survival because we don't have those components of what is called evolve. So then the program was really about saying, okay, we'll break it into 4 parts. One is on leadership. Then we will understand what is there in the space of neuroscience. Not all of it. There's plenty of it which we are going to cover. Like, for instance, we haven't covered cognitive biases. We haven't covered fixed mindset, growth mindset, mindfulness in any great detail. All of that will come up in Excel and in Embody. Then we spend some time in terms of digging deeper and understanding, why do I even exist? What is that whole purpose which is there in me? And if I have only an X amount of time, how do I manage it effectively and not take stress? And then, being a social animal, we need to be interacting all the time with colleagues, family, friends, relatives, whoever. And how do I make that interpersonal relationship as effective as I can? And those are the things which we discussed. All right. So when we talked about leadership, and we said most leaders we said they're not directive, authoritative, direction-giving big leaders sitting on a high horse like an emperor, but they are truly strategically, cognitively flexible people who think of the art of the possible. The art of the possible is all that is there to running an effective organization. You don't come with very set ideas in terms of how things are done here, but we try and figure out what is the best way we can navigate and manage the situation given all the constraints. And that needs a tremendous amount of flexibility because some of these moving parts change as we go along, and we need flexibility to navigate as a leader. We said we'll talk about it in 3 parts: the neuroscience concepts, adding value to ourselves, the internal self, and adding value to ourselves in the way we are in our interactions with the outside world and with society. First, we asked a few questions. Okay, now we know all these answers, all these questions, the answers are false. We use a fraction of our brains, we don't. Male brains are biologically better suited at math and science, and women's brains are better suited at empathy. No, not true. Adults can't grow new brain cells, completely false. Left brain and right brain, no, the theory has been thrown out of the window. Our brains are fully formed by the age of 12 or 14, and it doesn't grow after that. Totally false. Okay. So what is so empowering is this whole idea of neuroplasticity, that I can truly transform my brain, change my brain itself, fundamentally alter the structure of my brain by changing my thoughts. I can fundamentally alter the structure of my brain by changing my feelings. I can fundamentally alter my brain by changing my actions and behavior. Okay, so this is not some metaphorical sense we are saying that you can change your mind or change your, no, here we are talking about physically changing your brain where new neural connections are formed. It's like we remove a certain plumbing line and relay a new plumbing line. That's how it happens inside the brain. Only that is a far more complex neural circuitry as compared to the plumbing. The plumbing is an example or an analogy or a metaphor I use to explain the brain, but what happens in the brain is really, that is what happens. But then we need to be actively, consciously, deliberately changing our thoughts, changing our feelings, and changing our action. For that, we looked at the two brain centers, and we said there are two brain centers, which is the higher center or the willful mind. The second one is the one which is automatic, the one which is reactive. That is called the lower center. Now, because a lot of our thoughts, feelings keep coming up automatically, which is what we call at some point in time as automatic negative thoughts, automatic negative feelings, automatic negative, the emotions, all of that, thoughts, feelings, emotion. So all of that is automatic. What we do with the higher center is we shine a light on what is going on in the lower center. Because the higher center is the seat of conscious, deliberate action. So I can actually put my higher center to work. The lower center works automatically. So the higher center, I put it to work and shine on the lower center to try and understand what is happening there. Once I understand what is happening there, the process of mind training is about trying to work on saying, can I work on it differently? Can I take some aspects which are happening automatically? Can I consciously process it and then maybe put it back in the lower center? So even if it is automatic, it's coming out with a higher truth and a higher level of awareness to things. That's about the higher center, which is working on the lower center and the thoughts, ideas which are coming, and then consciously updating ourselves and changing our brain. And that is only possible because of neuroplasticity. And the process of that particular changing is called neurosculpting. So neurosculpting is essentially chipping away at our brain and forming new connections every day, slowly sculpting a new brain and embarking on our concept, the Yogakshema concept of evolve from the current me to a more happy, fulfilled, and purposeful me. And that is the process of neurosculpting. Like with everything else, we might sometimes know that there is a problem, but we don't know what to do about it unless we have the tools. And even before we have the tools, we need to gain an understanding of what is really going on, a sort of a diagnostic. So for the diagnostic, we needed a framework. And that framework is where we spoke about some of these things, where we said, okay, the one part where we have very hard thoughts and ideas is in our values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes. Values is what's important to me. Beliefs is what I believe to be true. Moral is what I believe to be right. And attitude is how I behave. He said, how sure can be about things which I take to be true, what I believe to be right? Is there certain universality to these values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes? Except for a few, okay? Say, for instance, fairness or honesty or some of those values. Other than that, values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes are simply not universal. I think we took the example of if you go for dinner and somebody has invited you home and you are the guest and you go to a house and the household is an Egyptian household, you don't ask for salt. If you ask for salt, that's an insult to the host that the food is not tasty. Now we can say, what kind of a weird logic is it? But I can assure you, if you all reflect there'll be at least 20 different things which we do as a culture, which we take for granted, which might or might not be a part of many other cultures. Many different understanding of our idea of what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is not true. All of that will get fundamentally shaken. I'm not saying we need to get to a place that we are unsure of everything, but to have the openness to really dig deeper so that we are able to alter ourselves. Not for nothing did Paulo Coelho say that traveling is the greatest educator. A lot of these values, beliefs, morals, attitudes are shaped by our socioeconomic, emotional, educational conditioning, and a lot of the dissonance which we have. If there is almost one area I can request all of you to work on, will be on what values, beliefs, morals, and attitudes, to go and dig deeper and say, how sure am I when I feel very sure about something? In fact, we don't even have to change a great deal. Just the recognition that my values, my beliefs, my morals, and my attitudes are mine. It is not necessary that the others' beliefs, morals, ethics, values, attitudes, and all that should be the same. It can be different, it will be different, and I don't take it as an insult to my values, beliefs, morals, and attitude. I will just take it as another set of values, beliefs, morals, and attitude, in which case we can accept the person in a whole manner rather than conditionally. When our expectations from others reduce, the focus turns to self, which really is a lot more empowering. So then we ask the natural question and say, hey, listen, if you keep saying I accept anything and everything which is going on, then what am I really doing? Do I accept everything? We said, no, you don't accept everything. There is a very clear line we draw between the things we will accept and the things we will act on. The serenity prayer's third line is the most important, which is the wisdom to know the difference. There are things I cannot change, which I try to change. Don't do that. There are things I can change, and I don't do anything about it. Don't do that either. So we don't want to be going in a place where it is reckless or we are abdicating responsibility. We want to hit that middle ground where we act on things we can change, accept things we can't change, and over a period of time, through thinking and reflection and deliberation, we understand the difference between the two and say, these are things I can act on, these are things I cannot act on, and therefore I need to be accepting them as we go. So God grant me the serenity to accept things I can't change, the courage to change things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So Yogashima's core focus is really that. If you see the byline, we say pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So we have to ask the question in terms of what exactly is inevitable and what is optional. We talked about it a little bit in stress, where we said pressure is inevitable. Stress is an option. What are the places where I need to be serene? What are the places I need to be courageous? Right? And then we drew that line and we call that line as the line of wisdom. The line of wisdom is the one which is able to separate out what is inevitable, acceptance zone, and serene zone, and what is in the optional action, courageous zone. And we have to be able to move right all the time so that we are able to work on more and more things. For that, we do not want an active lower center, because an active lower center really means unpleasant memories, bad experiences, anxieties, fear, failure, panic attack. All of that is an active lower center. So we want a lower center which is quieter. And we want a higher center which is more active, because a less active higher center would mean lack of courage, laziness, procrastination, and all kinds of things, which are things which we need to do deliberately, but we don't do. that puts us in some kind of an autopilot all the time, and we are running around like headless chicken, always busy, always acting, always doing something, but we really don't know where we are going. Like they say, if you don't know where we are going, every road will take us there. So acting easily is not courage, it's recklessness. And not acting and accepting easily is not serenity. Okay? It is avoidance, or more brutally, it's self-preservation. Right. So then we went on to reality, sensing, and perception, where we said, if you look at this little picture, and we can only soak in our inputs through the five senses, and once we soak it through the five senses, we send it into our brain, which goes and meets our various values, beliefs, morals, attitudes, and all of that filters. It goes through it, and it creates our reality. And our reality could be very different from the reality, and our reality will also be different from another person's reality of the same reality. Okay, that sentence sounded a bit like Nityananda. Pardon me for saying that. All I meant was that there is a reality, but if two people look at that reality, they will form very different perceptions about it. What are the filters which mask values, beliefs, morals, ethics, experiences, mindsets, and biases? And finally, the important thing called ants. The perception cycle is really, we see a reality, we perceive that reality, and that is my idea or my reality, my truth. But we somewhere conflate it and think of that as a fact. It's my truth. It's not a fact. Truth is personal. A fact is absolute. With that, I then store away that experience in my memory, which will then guide my reality. So there are ways in which we can break this perception cycle when we have a negative perception about something, somebody, some society, some group, or some entity. How? Two ways. Wayne Dyer helps us out here by saying, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. And the second one is soak in the reality fully, which is about mindfulness. So that we are not partially looking at something, we are not partially hearing it. Because many times when we listen, when we hear, we just hear, we don't listen. Because as soon as a few words are said, the mental process is on. Our own thoughts, ideas, experiences, memories, and everything else is already understanding that in a form and manner we think it is being said. But what is being said might be quite different from what we think is being said, which is why it's very important that we don't process. We keep our mind completely open. We have no judgment. We are just in the present moment and soaking it in through our senses. So changing perception is about saying, rather than making those absolute statements and saying, this is all, this guy is never going to change, and this is, this kid is never attentive in class, this kid is a bully, all kinds of labeling and all that. It just is a completely wasteful exercise. We just have to come back and ask the question, what is making the person unreasonable at this point in time? Maybe the answer is the person didn't have a good night's sleep. Maybe the person is hungry. Then we went into automatic negative thoughts. There are plenty of automatic negative thoughts we talked about. And these are involuntary thoughts. And there are about 70,000 thoughts which happen in our brain every day. And many of them are repetitive thoughts. Almost 80% of them are negative thoughts. And these thoughts keep coming back and looping in our head. There is no additional data we are collecting. We get upset about some situation. The quantum to which we are upset is this. But then our thought will feed back, and then it will grow into a bigger sense of being upset and keep growing in our head. Did the person come to upset us one more time? No. Should then not be that the extent to which I'm upset should not be growing. No, it grows. Why does it grow? Because the mind keeps looping, that negative thought keeps looping. And that is what we call as the ant cycle. And the ants keep breeding, turning them into negative feelings, because feelings are chemicals which flow all through our body. We start feeling quite weak, negative, disappointed, upset, angry, whatever. And if we have enough of it, and it happens every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, then we just become a negative person. And we can only look at things with that kind of tinted glass. Two of the biggest ants are blaming and defending. One of them is looking outside for reasons for our failures. The other one is unwilling to take ownership of any mistakes which might have happened. I can sort of empathize with that somewhat, because we are all brought up in a society where we are not supposed to fail. We keep telling our children, we keep telling ourselves that all the time you have to get it right, you have to do it right, it has to be always right and right and right and right. And there's so much of right. We don't give enough breathing space for wrong, for failure to breed, because that's the breeding ground from which creativity and great ideas, and the right also comes from that breeding ground, right? No child has started walking from the first steps she took. They all have to fall and get up. We somehow accept that at some point in time, it gets eliminated from our whole thought process, and we spend the rest of our life just defending. Any form of labeling is a problem. And a lot of times, even with our children, we end up labeling them. We call a child as intelligent. We call them with these kinds of things, which is extremely negative, to call a child as you are an intelligent person, because they spend the rest of their life defending that position. They take risks which are much lower than what they should be taking, because they are worried if they fail, then they might not be intelligent anymore. It's a label, it's a cross they bear. We think we are doing a good thing by telling a child you are intelligent. We are not. It's a bad idea. Coming back, so blaming and defending comes from a position of I'm okay, you're not okay. And the impact of ants is the past is all about regrets, the current is unsatisfactory, and the future creates anxiety. The fact of the matter is, most ants are false. When you get the ants, write it down and put it to a true or false check, and you will realize 7 out of 10 ants are false. And we have the power to change. How? We use the higher center, because ants happen in the lower center. We use our higher center to shine the light on the lower center so that we can understand what is going on there. All right. Yeah, Rakal says 30 minutes done. Yes, Rakal. I will try and wrap it up in the next 10 minutes. All right. Then we came to the section which was self-empowerment. Okay. Self-empowerment, the first thing we talked about was saying, okay, I can change. I understand how automatic negative thoughts work. I understand how I can change my morals, beliefs, values, and attitudes. I can change my perception. Okay, where do I apply all this? The first we said was use it to find your purpose. Use it to find the activity where you will be in flow. A flow is a genuinely satisfying experience with deep involvement that time just suspends, because we are doing a task which really is of a high level of challenge for the competence, and we get the full satisfaction if we actually do it well. Okay. Then we integrated purpose and flow and put it into this small little framework, which is not ours. It's a Japanese concept, which is called Ikigai. That's a busy slide. We will anyway share this slide. And in the interest of time, we can move forward. All of us know Ikigai. Okay. So then once I found my purpose, I found my area in which I want to be working on, the place where I'm likely to find the flow, then there are two other important elements which I need to look after. One, I need to prioritize it. I need to put it at the top of my agenda because that's very important. And the way time management, the way life goes, is we always end up focusing on the urgent and less on the important. So we said time management, take a larger view to it. Don't think of it in terms of tips and tricks. They're useful, but they only have a certain amount of value, these tips and tricks. But rather the bigger trick is to find out what is that you don't want to take up, what is that you want to reduce, and what is that you want to reuse, because time for us is the only non-renewable resource. Where rather than telling action, so action expresses priorities rather than saying it is not something I have time for, I really am so pressed. Just replace that sentence in your head with saying that it is not my priority. That's all. Okay. So as long as we replace in our head saying that whenever we feel like saying, I don't have time to do that, just replace it with saying, it's not my priority to do that. That itself will have a very, very important and a profound change in ourselves. Then pressure and stress, where pressure is something all of us undergo. It is external. And it is not something which is entirely in our control and it comes out from outside. But stress is an internal response. It's a choice. There are certain stresses which are automatic, but a lot of the stress, it's a choice. We can deliberately, activate our parasympathetic nervous system and reduce the level of stress levels. We talked about all of that. So stress is really an internal reaction to the external situation, which is causing the pressure. Where the only guiding principle we said was from Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, between stimuli and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. Then interpersonal relationship. The first part in interpersonal relationship we talked about was critical thinking. Because when somebody presents something to us, the normal process is to go from data to analysis to conclusion. But nowadays, what happens more and more is that we start with a conclusion, we start with a preformed idea, and we look for data to fit it. Not a good idea. And to reclaim our critical thinking, we said, first of all, take charge of your critical thinking by being skeptical. 2, stay away from fear feeders, also called news. Avoid it completely if you can. Read long articles. So otherwise we can ask the question, how do I then get to know about COVID? Read long articles. But don't listen to news and all these shouting matches which happen. Be watchful of confirmation bias. Don't look for one person or one agent who has created all this. And don't be misled by eloquence, is all the things we talked about when it came to critical thinking. Trust, I'm going to run through it slowly because I want to spend a bit of time on the last 3 slides. Stephen Covey says it's the #1 leadership competency. To be able to create trust, to be able to lead with trust. And for trust, the starting point is we should know how to cede control. We need to accept at a deeper level, things might not happen exactly the way I want. Not because they don't want to do it the way I want them to do it. It's just because they will do it in their own way. And that requires trust to let go. Trust characteristics are about talking straight, demonstrating concern, creating transparency, and taking accountability because I'm still responsible for everything which happens out there. Then the 2 other concepts we talked about, one was putting ourselves in the shoes of others, which is empathy. The only thing with empathy is when somebody is saying something, try not to solve it. Don't relate it to another situation which you might have gone through. Try not to talk and interrupt during the problem because all of them hijacks a situation when all that is called for is listening. And finally, authenticity, right? Which is just being ourselves, whatever we are. Okay, I'm going to skip this slide and come to antidotes and tools. We've seen all these antidotes and tools, but I just wanted to make a small list and leave it there. First, if we want to change our belief system, take a person, take a situation, take a group where you have a certain amount of negative feeling towards it or towards them, and find one good thing. Genuinely, honestly, not facetiously, but genuinely, honestly, try and find one good thing about a person, about a group. In fact, if possible, say it to them. That creates trust. Perception is changing the way you look at things so that the things you look at will change. It's about having that humility to understand I might be completely wrong in the way I'm looking at things. Is there another way I can look at the same situation? All right? It's about soaking in the reality in its fullness. For ants, the two wonderful ideas are write down when you get the ants, because one, it will not feed and loop and fester. Two, you put it in a certain place, and therefore you can subject it to a true or false test at a later point in time. In ants, while we keep thinking of all the negative things, there are plenty of things we need to be grateful for. Even having two hands, two legs, and a roof, and a warm bed, and 3 square meals is something to be enormously grateful for. 30–40% of our country is going to bed without a third meal, not because they don't want it, because they can't afford it. There's plenty to be grateful for. The second thing about ants, one sweep, you can take out all blaming and defending by taking central accountability, where we say, I am not, the one responsible for this, but I take responsibility for this. The two are very different things. I'm not the one responsible for a certain situation, but I take responsibility for that situation. That in one shot will scratch out blaming, will scratch out defending. The only thing is, at a higher level in our values, beliefs, we have to accept that failure is very much a part of the process of learning and growth. If you have that belief system, then we will not have a problem with failure. Just not having a problem with failure will immediately dilute the power of blaming and defending. And then if I tell myself, I might not be responsible for it, but I take responsibility for it, and that will completely eliminate blaming and defending. Take time out, take a day or two, go back and reflect on what exactly is your purpose. We know the 4 circles in Ikigai which mesh, find your flow, and go and do something with both our personal and professional lives, something where all these get integrated so that that can create a greater sense of joy and fulfillment. Time management, just one small trick. Whenever you want to say the sentence, I don't have time to do this, you just replace it with, it's not my priority to do this, because it's empowering. I don't have time seems like somebody has not granted it. It's not my priority means I chose not to do that. Just turning that finger inwards helps us in time management, helps us with our priority. Remember, stress is internal and it's your choice whether you want to go through it or don't want to go through it, or how much you want to go through it. Critical thinking, develop the habit of thinking for yourself. There are news articles, there are televisions, there are books, and there are any number of things, but develop an ability to think for yourself independently with no crutches around us. In interpersonal relationship, just simply lead with trust. Okay. Understand and listen to what the other person is saying and try to be as authentic. Authenticity is actually not very difficult. It's just that hypocrisy and phonyism clouds us. All that we have to do is remove it. It's a bit like neurosculpting, It's authenticity is all we are. I mean, we are nothing but what we are. So that's not very difficult, but quite difficult to practice because we have created so many layers and so many images and so many images in the eyes of others about ourselves that we don't want that to change because that gives us comfort, that gives us a sense of status. We should be happy to let go of it. Some of the other important tips are in terms of physical activity, in terms of nutrition, have a good, solid, healthy sleep hygiene, laughter, and finally, whatever you do, enjoy that particular process. Nothing is really worth it if you don't enjoy that particular process. Yeah. Thank you very much. I have nothing more, and I can stop sharing so that we can have a good, solid, lively discussion.